The massive starship Eternal Dawn drifted silently through the void of space, its crystalline halls gleaming under the light of distant stars. But in the royal chambers, deep within its heart, Queen Zarathis sat alone on the cold floor, her hands trembling as she stared at the shattered remains of what had once been her daughter's most precious treasure. The biomechanical butterfly lay in pieces across the marble tiles, its delicate wings broken, its tiny quantum core dark and lifeless. And for the first time in her 300-year reign over the mighty Lyralei Empire, the queen felt completely powerless. She had ruled star systems, commanded fleets that could destroy planets, negotiated peace treaties that saved billions of lives. Yet she could not fix a simple toy that meant everything to her 8-year-old daughter. The butterfly had been more than just a plaything. It was a miracle of Lyralei, technology that projected holographic memories of Princess Lyra's father, allowing the child to see him smile, hear his voice, watch him tell bedtime stories whenever she missed him too much. Her mate, the great Admiral Kethmoron, had given it to Lyra just days before he died, fighting the machine plague at the edge of their territory. And it had become her connection to a father she would never see again. Now it was destroyed, and it was all Zarathis's fault. She had been working late again, trying to balance the crushing responsibilities of ruling an empire while raising a daughter alone. When exhaustion and grief finally overwhelmed her careful control, a moment of clumsiness, a sweep of her arm across the shelf, and the butterfly had fallen to the stone floor with a sound like breaking dreams. The toy's own security systems had activated upon impact, sealing its quantum memory core to prevent tampering, but in doing so, they had made repair impossible. Zarathis wiped the strange, clear tears from her crystalline cheeks. Her people rarely showed such emotion. But losing her mate had broken something inside her that even time could not heal. She heard small footsteps in the corridor and quickly tried to compose herself, but it was too late. Princess Lyra appeared in the doorway, her large violet eyes taking in the scene with the terrible understanding that children possess when their world shifts beneath their feet. "Mother?" the little girl whispered, her voice barely audible above the ship's gentle humming. Instead of screaming or crying, as Zarathis expected, Lyra knelt beside her mother and wrapped her tiny arms around the queen's shoulders. "It's okay," the child said with wisdom that should not belong to someone so young. "Daddy's memories are in here too," she added, pressing her small hand against her chest, right over her heart. But Zarathis knew the truth. She had seen how Lyra played with the butterfly every night, talking to her father's holographic image, asking him about his day, telling him about her lessons and her dreams. The toy had been the child's anchor in a universe that had taken her father away too soon. By morning, the royal engineers had examined the broken butterfly and delivered their verdict with typical Lyralei precision. The quantum memory core was fractured beyond repair, its delicate matrix of light and energy scattered like stardust in the wind. Their advanced technology could build weapons that cracked moons and shields that turned aside supernovas. But it could not restore something so fragile once it was broken. Word spread quickly through the ship's corridors, and crew members approached their queen with gentle sympathy, but none could offer hope. The butterfly's destruction seemed final, absolute, a loss that even their mighty empire could not undo. As night fell aboard the Eternal Dawn, Queen Zarathis sat in her chambers once more, holding the broken toy in her hands, wondering how she would tell her daughter that this last piece of her father was truly gone forever, unaware that help would come from the most unexpected source, a simple human mechanic who understood that sometimes the most impossible things could be fixed with nothing more than love, determination, and a willingness to see solutions where others saw only endings. The morning alarm chimed softly through the eternal dawn as routine maintenance reports flooded the bridge. But one particular alert caught the attention of the duty officer. minor ventilation malfunction in Section C7. The human quarters where Earth's diplomatic engineers lived during the cultural exchange program. Most Valthari consider these humans to be primitive creatures. Interesting in their crude creativity, but hardly worth serious attention. Yet protocol demanded that all ship systems remain perfect. So a repair request was automatically generated and sent to the nearest available technician. Marcus Chen had just finished his breakfast of reconstituted protein bars and synthetic coffee when his wrist communicator buzzed with the work order. And he grabbed his worn toolbox with practiced ease, expecting nothing more than a simple filter replacement or loose connection. The 34-year-old mechanic from the Mars colonies was used to being dismissed by the elegant aliens, who towered over him with their crystalline features and superior technology. But he didn't mind. He had learned long ago that being underestimated often worked to his advantage. As he made his way through the ship's gleaming corridors, past murals that told the history of the Valthari Empire in flowing script he couldn't read, Marcus whistled an old Earth tune that reminded him of his daughter Sarah, who was probably just waking up on Mars with her mother, getting ready for another day of school and play. He had volunteered for this deep space assignment partly for the experience, but mostly for the generous pay that would secure his family's future, even if it meant months away from the people he loved most. When the door to the royal quarters slid open with a whisper of displaced air, Marcus expected to find some minor mechanical issue. But instead, he discovered Queen Zarathis herself sitting in the center of the vast chamber, her usually perfect posture broken, her hands clutching something small and fragmented against her chest. The sight stopped him cold. He had only seen the queen from a distance during formal ceremonies, where she appeared as untouchable as a statue carved from living crystal. But now she looked exactly like what she was beneath all the royal protocol, a mother in pain. The broken butterfly lay scattered around her like the pieces of a shattered rainbow, its beautiful wings cracked, its tiny mechanisms exposed and clearly beyond the reach of conventional repair. And even without understanding the technology involved, Marcus could see that this was more than just a broken toy. It was a broken heart made manifest. "Your Majesty," he began carefully, setting down his toolbox and forgetting all the formal speeches he had memorized for addressing alien royalty. Rough night. The question came out naturally, the way he might speak to any parent dealing with a crisis, and something in his tone made Queen Zarathis look up with surprise. Her violet eyes were still bright with unshed tears, and for a moment the vast distance between their species seemed to collapse into something simple and human, or whatever the alien equivalent might be. She studied his weathered face, noting the laugh lines around his eyes and the gentle concern in his expression, and found herself doing something that protocol strictly forbade. She began to talk. The words poured out of her like water through a broken dam, telling this strange human about her daughter's treasure, about the impossibility of repair according to the greatest minds in her empire, about the crushing weight of failure that pressed down on her shoulders like the gravity of a collapsing star. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking practical questions that somehow cut straight to the heart of the problem in ways her own engineers had never considered. When she finally fell silent, emotionally drained but oddly relieved, he surprised her by stepping closer and asking with genuine curiosity, "Mind if I take a look?" The request should have been absurd. What could this primitive human possibly understand about quantum memory cores and biomechanical engineering that the greatest Valthari scientists had missed? Yet something in his calm confidence suggested that perhaps the impossible might not be quite as final as everyone believed, setting the stage for a miracle that would begin with nothing more than a mechanic's intuition and a father's understanding of what truly mattered. Marcus knelt beside the broken butterfly with the careful reverence of someone who understood that he was holding more than metal and circuits. He was holding a family's love made tangible. And as he pulled out his jeweler's loupe and began examining the shattered quantum core, A crowd of Velthari engineers gathered around. Him like skeptical observers at a magic show they knew would fail. Chief Engineer Veltarin crossed his arms and spoke in the condescending tone reserved for explaining. Obvious facts to children. Human. The quantum memory matrix has been fractured at the subatomic level. Attempting repair would be like trying to reassemble scattered photons or reverse the flow of time itself. The other engineers nodded in agreement, their crystalline faces showing the polite patience of experts watching an amateur stumble toward inevitable failure. But Marcus ignored their words and focused on what his eyes were telling him through the magnifying lens. Where the Velthari saw only destruction, Marcus began to perceive patterns, fragments of the quantum core that still pulsed with faint energy. Microscopic pathways that remained intact despite the catastrophic damage, and most importantly, emotional resonance markers that his trained human intuition recognized even if he couldn't name them scientifically. "Your people build things to last forever," he murmured, his fingers tracing the delicate fracture lines with surprising gentleness. "But sometimes things aren't meant to last forever. Sometimes they're meant to be loved. And love changes everything it touches." The engineers exchanged glances that clearly said the primitive human had finally lost his mind. But Queen Zarathus watched with growing fascination as Marcus began working with tools that seemed almost crude compared to Velthari precision. Instruments, a small soldering iron, lengths of copper wire, bits of crystal salvaged from his own equipment, and most puzzling of all, a worn photograph of a young girl hugging a stuffed robot that had obviously been repaired many times with tape and patches. Through the long night, Marcus worked with methodical patience, not trying to restore the original technology, but creating something entirely new, a hybrid device that combined the salvaged quantum fragments with human engineering principles that prioritized emotional connection over technical perfection. He asked Princess Lyra strange questions about her favorite memories with her father, about the games they played and the songs he sang, then programmed the new device to respond, not to precise commands, but to the child's heartbeat, her breathing patterns, her emotional states. The result horrified the Velthari engineers. The holographic projections flickered unpredictably. The butterfly's movements seemed random rather than controlled. And sometimes the memories played in combinations that defied the original programming. But when Lyra first held the restored toy against her chest, something magical happened that no amount of perfect engineering could have achieved. The butterfly began to glow with soft warmth that matched the rhythm of the little girl's pulse, its wings moving in response to her emotions rather than mechanical instructions. And as tears of joy rolled down her cheeks, the holographic image of her father seemed to reach out with arms made of light and love. "Daddy," Lyra whispered, and the butterfly responded by projecting not just stored memories, but new patterns of light that felt like hugs from beyond the stars. Like kisses goodnight from a father who would always be present in his daughter's heart. The Velthari engineers stared in stunned silence as their fundamental understanding of technology crumbled before their eyes. This impossible repair should not work according to every law of physics they understood. Yet here it was, functioning, not through logic, but through something far more powerful. Marcus smiled as he watched the little princess dance with her restored butterfly, knowing that he had given her something even more precious than her original toy had shown her that love could triumph over loss. That broken things could become beautiful in new ways. And that sometimes the most advanced solution was also the simplest one, refusing to give up on what mattered most. No matter how impossible the task might seem, the impossible news spread through the eternal dawn like wildfire racing through dry grass. The primitive human had accomplished what the greatest minds in the Velthari Empire had declared impossible. And within hours of Princess Lyra's joyful reunion with her restored butterfly, crew members began appearing at Marcus's quarters with trembling hands and desperate hope. carrying their own broken treasures that they had mourned as lost forever. First came Communications Officer Thelmira, clutching a music box that had belonged to her grandmother, its delicate mechanism frozen silent since a power surge during the war with the machine plague. And she watched with wonder as Marcus dismantled the pristine Valtheri casing to reveal the simple melody wheel inside, then rebuilt it with human components that somehow made the ancient lullaby sound more beautiful than it ever had before. Next arrived Navigator Zenkoth, with a family portrait that wouldn't display 7 generations of his bloodline trapped in corrupted data that the ship's computers couldn't decode. But Marcus saw patterns where the machines saw only chaos. And soon the image flickered to life as an interactive memory that responded to touch, allowing Zenkoth to zoom in on faces he thought he'd never see again and hear their voices speaking across the years. The trickle became a flood as word reached every deck of the massive starship. And Marcus found himself working 18-hour days, not because he had to, but because he couldn't bear to turn away the hope in their alien eyes, each repair teaching him more about Valthari culture while simultaneously showing them that their rigid approach to technology had blinded them to possibilities that existed just beyond the edge of logic. A broken meditation crystal became a mood light that reflected its user's emotional state and cascading colors that helped heal trauma from the recent wars. A damaged datapad containing centuries-old love letters was transformed into a storytelling device that could adapt the ancient romance to modern situations. And a shattered ceremonial mask from a coming Vogue ritual was rebuilt with materials from the ship itself, becoming a living artwork that grew more beautiful with each passing day. Queen Zarathus watched this transformation with growing amazement that bordered on fear. Her people, who had conquered star systems through technological superiority, were learning profound lessons from someone they had considered intellectually inferior, and more disturbing still, they were beginning to question the very foundations of their civilization's approach to existence. But the real test of Marcus's revolutionary methods came when the ship's long-range sensors detected a desperate distress signal from the edge of Valthari space. The colony ship Hope's Promise, carrying 50,000 settlers to establish a new world, had suffered catastrophic damage from an unexpected asteroid storm and was dying slowly in the cold emptiness between stars. The Royal Engineers calculated repair times with their usual precision. The ship's critical systems could be restored within acceptable parameters, but the thousands of personal items destroyed by the impact, family heirlooms, cultural artifacts, irreplaceable memories stored in damaged data cores would have to be written off as acceptable losses, a standard wartime decision that prioritized survival over sentiment. Marcus listened to their clinical assessment with growing horror, understanding that these acceptable losses represented the very soul of an entire civilization in miniature. And when he volunteered to accompany the rescue mission, Queen Zarathus realized that her empire was about to face its greatest challenge, not from external enemies, but from a simple human truth, that some things mattered more than mere survival, and that sometimes saving what made life worth living was more important than preserving life itself. The Eternal Dawn changed course toward the dying colony ship, carrying with it a human mechanic, whose revolutionary approach to repair work was about to determine whether 50,000 Valthari would merely survive their tragedy or emerge from it transformed, setting the stage for a final confrontation between the Empire's coldly logical traditions and the warm, chaotic power of human determination to never give up on what truly mattered. The Hope's Promise floated in space like a wounded giant, its hull torn open by asteroid impacts that had turned the once magnificent colony ship into a graveyard of shattered dreams. And when Marcus stepped through the airlock into the devastation, he felt the weight of 50,000 broken lives pressing down on him like the gravity of a dying star. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows, cross corridors littered with the remnants of personal belongings, children's toys crushed beyond recognition, family photographs scattered like fallen leaves, art pieces that had taken lifetimes to create, now reduced to fragments that crunched underfoot with each step. The Velthari rescue teams worked with mechanical efficiency to restore life support and navigation systems, their cold logic determining that the non-essential personal items were acceptable casualties in the larger scheme of survival. But Marcus saw something entirely different in the hollow eyes of the survivors, who wandered through the wreckage like ghosts searching for pieces of their souls. He organized volunteers from both species into repair teams, teaching them his hybrid philosophy that valued meaning over perfection. And soon the damaged corridors echoed with an unusual sound that hadn't been heard aboard a Velthari vessel. In centuries laughter, as families rediscovered treasures they thought were lost forever. A little boy's broken toy starship became a symbol of resilience when Marcus rebuilt it using metal from the ship's own hull, transforming it from a simple plaything into a memorial that reminded everyone that they were all travelers on a journey that would continue despite the obstacles they faced. An elderly artist destroyed sculptures were reconstructed using debris from the asteroid impact itself, becoming a powerful monument to survival that grew more beautiful with each edition, while a damaged community database containing genealogical records became a collaborative project that brought scattered families together in ways the original sterile data storage never could have achieved. Princess Lyra, now confident and healed by her own experience with impossible repair, became Marcus's most trusted assistant. Her small hands perfect for delicate work and her intuitive understanding of the butterfly's hybrid technology making her invaluable for the most challenging tasks. Together, they tackled the ship's central memory core, which contained the entire cultural heritage of the colony's thousands of years of history, literature, music, and tradition that had been corrupted beyond the reach of conventional Velthari data recovery systems. Marcus worked for 3 days straight, combining his pattern recognition skills with Lyra's emotional intelligence, creating not just a restored archive, but a living memory that could grow and adapt, where ancient stories connected to modern experiences and the past informed the future instead of imprisoning it. When the Hope's Promise finally limped into orbit around its destination world, it carried more than just survivors, carried a transformed people who had learned that preservation wasn't about keeping things unchanged, but about allowing them to evolve and grow stronger through adversity. Queen Zarathus stood on the bridge watching the successful landing, then turned to Marcus with tears of gratitude streaming down her crystalline cheeks as she officially established the Human Velthari Restoration Corps, with the humble mechanic from Mars as its first director, knowing that his revolutionary approach would spread across the Empire like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Years later, as Princess Lyra grew into a young woman and eventually became a mother herself, she would teach her own daughter the lessons Marcus had shown them, all that broken things could become more beautiful than they were before. Love was stronger than logic, and that sometimes the most advanced technology in the universe was simply the refusal to give up on what mattered most. The butterfly still danced around them during these teaching moments, no longer a perfect recreation of the past, but a living bridge between memory and hope, its flickering light a testament to the power of human determination to find solutions where others saw only problems, proving that the greatest strength of humanity wasn't their tools or their weapons, but their absolute conviction that nothing truly precious could ever be lost as long as someone cared enough to keep trying to save it.